"I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitmore," the supplier said, "but I can't deliver your order tomorrow." My heart stopped. What? Why not? A very important client needs everything I've got. I didn't need to ask who is behind all this. I needed supplies for Saturday's reopening. Without them, I had nothing to sell. This is the story of Claudia Whitmore, a widow who dared to dream again. In a small town full of whispers, she'll discover that courage, kindness, and even love can rise, like bread, again. Before we begin the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it truly helps support this channel. The kettle whistled at exactly 7:15, the same time it had whistled every morning for 32 years. I poured boiling water over my tea bag and watched amber color bloom through the clear liquid. Steam fogged my reading glasses. Some mornings, I still set out 2 cups. My kitchen was small but mine. Morning light came through lace curtains, the ones my late husband, Peter, had complained were too fussy. I'd kept them anyway. Now I was glad. They made the sunlight softer, kinder. I spread butter on wheat toast and let my eyes wander to the wooden spoon hanging by the stove. Peter had carved our initials into the handle during our first year of marriage. CW plus PW. The letters were worn smooth from decades of my thumb rubbing over them. I remembered the first time we baked together. A Saturday in June, 28 years ago. Peter had wanted to surprise his mother with lemon cake. He'd measured everything wrong. The cake came out flat as a pancake and twice as rubbery. We'd laughed until our sides hurt. Then we'd tried again. That second cake rose golden and perfect. I blinked hard and sipped my tea. It burned my tongue. Peter had been gone for 3 years now. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The house was too quiet. I finished my toast and washed my cup. 8 o'clock. Time for my walk into town. Outside, September air smelled like cut grass and the last roses of summer. My feet knew the route by heart. Down Maple Street, past the elementary school, left on Cherry Lane. The town was waking up around me. Car doors slammed. Dogs barked. As I rounded the corner onto Main Street, my heart did its familiar lift. The bakery, Sunrise Bakery, had stood on that corner for 40 years. I'd bought every birthday cake there, every holiday pie, every Tuesday morning cinnamon roll. But something was wrong. The lights were off. The window displays were empty. A white sign hung in the door, closed permanently. Thank you for 40 wonderful years. My chest tightened. I pressed my hand against the glass. Inside, the display cases stood bare. The cheerful yellow walls looked dim and sad. 40 years gone. Sad, isn't it? I turned. Nora Reese stood beside me, yoga mat tucked under one arm. Nora was 26 and lived in the apartment across the street. She had bright optimism that made you feel tired and hopeful at the same time. I can't believe it, I said. His daughter moved him to Florida. Said it was too much work. Nora shook her head. Now we have to drive 20 minutes for decent bread. I stared at the empty bakery and felt something crack open inside me. A longing I'd been pushing down for years. How many times had I dreamed of opening my own bakery? You should do it, Nora said, studying my face. Do what? Open a bakery. You're an incredible baker, Claudia. Remember those raspberry tarts at the potluck? People talked about them for weeks. Too old, I thought. Too late. No money. You'll fail. But Nora was already scrolling on her phone, looking up business loans. Let's just think about it. No pressure. We walked together down Main Street. I watched a little girl bite into a chocolate croissant, her eyes closing in pure bliss. That expression. That moment of simple joy. I wanted to create that. I'll think about it, I heard myself say. At the farmer's market, I bought tomatoes and fresh basil. As I turned to leave, a voice stopped me cold. Claudia Whitmore. Still shopping for one, I see. I knew that voice. Smooth, cultured, with an edge underneath. Vivian Crawford stood beside a display of organic honey, immaculate in a cream blazer and pearl earrings. Vivian was 65 but looked 50. She'd been president of every committee in town for a decade. Garden Club, Historical Society, Library Board. Vivian didn't just live in our town. She ruled it. Hello, Vivian, I said carefully. I heard about poor Mr. Grayson's bakery. Such a shame. Though his pastries had become rather pedestrian. Vivian picked up a jar of honey, examined it, set it down without buying. Someone should really open a proper bakery downtown. Someone who has money, and experience, and connections. She looked directly at me. Still, one can dream, right? Something in her tone felt like a warning wrapped in velvet. Wait. Does she know about my conversation with Nora? One can, I said quietly. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. Do take care, Claudia. I hope you can manage. These are challenging times for women our age. She walked away, heels clicking on pavement. I stood there, heart beating faster than it should. Women our age. I walked home slowly. By the time I reached my place, something had shifted inside me. Vivian's condescension had lit a small fire in my chest. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was 3 years of grief finally pushing me toward something new. But I was going to try. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I wrote numbers, crossed them out, wrote them again. I made lists of equipment, recipes, suppliers. Peter's wooden spoon hung nearby, and I imagined him looking over my shoulder, nodding encouragement. Here goes nothing, I whispered to the empty kitchen. The bank smelled like old carpets and broken dreams. I sat in a stiff chair across from a loan officer named Mr. Preston. He was younger than my son, with a nervous habit of clicking his pen. Click, click, click. Each click felt like a tiny rejection. Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. Preston said. He hadn't looked at my business plan for more than 30 seconds. But given your lack of commercial experience and limited collateral. I have collateral, I interrupted. My home is paid off. And I've been baking for 40 years. Personal baking and commercial baking are quite different. Click, click. There's also the matter of market saturation. We've had inquiries from other investors interested in downtown bakery spaces." My stomach dropped. Other investors? Mr. Preston shuffled papers. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm not at liberty to discuss other clients. But your application doesn't meet our current lending criteria. I'm sorry." I walked out of the bank in a daze. The afternoon sun felt too bright. Nora was waiting outside, leaning against her car. "So how did it go?" Nora asked. "They said no," I said. "What? Did you show them your business plan?" He barely looked at it. I took a deep breath. He mentioned other investors. "Nora, what if someone else is trying to buy the bakery space?" Nora's face darkened. "Let me guess. Someone with connections?" We both knew who she meant. Vivian Crawford sat on the board of First National Bank. Her family had for 3 generations. "Don't let them push you out," Nora said fiercely. "We'll find another way." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Vivian's smile at the farmer's market. The way she'd said, "Women our age," like it was a terminal diagnosis. The next morning, Nora knocked on my door at 8 o'clock, holding her laptop and bagels. "I found something. It's not Main Street, but it's close. And it's available." She turned her laptop to face me. The listing showed a small storefront on Cherry Lane, 3 blocks from downtown. Tall windows, exposed brick walls, enough space for a kitchen and seating area. The rent was reasonable. Almost too reasonable. "Cherry Lane is quieter," I said slowly. "Less foot traffic." "So we create the traffic. We make your bakery so good that people seek it out." Nora bit into a bagel. "We use social media. I'll help you. You'll be famous." The space was even better in person. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows. The brick walls were warm and rustic. I could already imagine where the display case would go, where the tables would sit, where I'd hang Peter's wooden spoon. "I love it," I whispered. The landlord handed me an application. "I'll need references and first and last month's rent. I can have you in here by next week." 3 days later, I signed a lease for 1 year. My hands shook as I wrote my name. This was real. This was happening. Nora posted a photo of the empty storefront on social media. "Something sweet is coming to Cherry Lane. Stay tuned." Within an hour, it had 50 likes and a dozen comments. People were curious. People were excited. But not everyone. I ran into Edith Sinclair at the post office the next day. Edith was 72 and knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. She cornered me by the stamp machine. "Heard you're opening a bakery," Edith said. Her eyes were sharp behind rhinestone glasses. "And you know Vivian Crawford's not pleased." "Vivian doesn't own the town," I said, more bravely than I felt. "No, but she likes to think she does." Edith lowered her voice. "Word is she tried to buy that Cherry Lane space herself. When she found out you'd leased it, she was spitting nails. Watch yourself, dear. Vivian plays dirty." That afternoon, I received the first blow. The commercial oven I'd ordered, a used but reliable model, was suddenly unavailable. The seller called to say he'd received a better offer and sold it to someone else. "An anonymous buyer," he said. I sat on the floor of my empty bakery space and wanted to cry. Without an oven, I had nothing. Need some coffee? I looked up. A man stood in the doorway, tall and lean with silver hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He was holding 2 paper cups from the cafe across the street. "I'm James Callahan," he said. "I own the bookshop next door. Saw you moving in yesterday and thought you might need caffeine." I stood and brushed off my jeans. Claudia Whitmore. And yes, I desperately need caffeine. Thank you. We sat on the floor together, backs against the brick wall. The coffee was hot and strong and exactly what I needed. James told me he'd retired from running a restaurant in Portland and moved here 2 years ago. "Why did you retire?" I asked. James was quiet for a moment. "I made some mistakes. Lost a business partner, lost a restaurant, lost my confidence. My wife passed away 5 years ago. After that, I couldn't seem to get anything right. So I ran away to a small town and hid in a bookshop." His honesty startled me. "I'm sorry. About your wife. I'm sorry about your oven." I blinked. "How did you know about my oven?" "Small town. Word travels." James studied me. "I'm guessing someone doesn't want you to succeed. Someone with money and influence." I didn't need to say her name. James nodded slowly. "Vivian Crawford tried to block my bookshop too when I first opened. She claimed the town didn't need more retail. But I'm still here. And you will be too." His confidence steadied me. We talked for another hour. James told me about suppliers, equipment dealers, ways to work around obstacles. He'd been exactly where I was now. And he'd survived. When he left, I felt less alone. That evening, I started baking at home. Small batches. Blueberry muffins, chocolate chip cookies, lemon bars. I worked late into the night, and the familiar rhythm of measuring and mixing calmed my racing thoughts. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. Inside was a handwritten note on plain paper: "Don't give up. This town needs you. You're stronger than you know. A friend." I read it 3 times. The handwriting was shaky, elderly. I thought immediately of Edith Sinclair. Nora arrived at noon with a folding table and a plan. "We're setting up at the farmer's market tomorrow. Free samples. Get people excited." That night, I baked until 2 in the morning. Raspberry tarts, cinnamon rolls, mini cheesecakes. My tiny kitchen looked like a bakery exploded. But everything smelled like heaven. As I finally climbed into bed, exhausted and flour-dusted, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. Direction. Hope. Peter's wooden spoon hung on a hook by my bed now. I touched the worn initials with 1 finger. "Wish me luck," I whispered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow Vivian might strike again. But tomorrow I would also hand someone a perfect raspberry tart and watch their face light up with joy. Tomorrow, I would keep fighting. Opening day arrived like a storm I wasn't ready for. I'd been awake since 4 in the morning, my hands shaking as I measured flour and sugar. The borrowed oven, James had found it through a restaurant supplier friend, sat against the back wall like a temperamental beast. It was older than I'd hoped, but it worked. Mostly. Nora had strung fairy lights across the windows. She'd made hand-lettered signs announcing our grand opening. Fresh flowers sat in mason jars on each table. Everything looked charming and hopeful and terrifyingly real. "You've got this," Nora said, squeezing my shoulder. She'd arrived at 6 to help. Her enthusiasm made me feel braver and more fraudulent at the same time. I slid the first batch of cinnamon rolls into the oven. The sweet smell of cinnamon and butter filled the small space. This was it. This was everything I'd worked toward for the past 6 weeks. At 8 o'clock, I unlocked the front door. A small crowd had gathered outside. Neighbors I recognized, curious strangers, even Mrs. Henderson from across the street. My heart swelled. "Welcome to Whitmore's Bakery," I said. My voice only shook a little. The first hour went beautifully. People bought scones and muffins and coffee. They complimented the cozy atmosphere, the delicious pastries, my warm smile. I felt like I was floating. This was working. I was doing it. Then the oven started making noises. A grinding sound, deep and mechanical. I was pulling out a tray of raspberry tarts when the temperature gauge suddenly spiked. The oven was overheating. Fast. "Nora," I called, trying to keep my voice calm. "Something's wrong." She rushed over. We stared at the gauge climbing higher and higher. 100 degrees over the set temperature. Then 200. "Turn it off," Nora said. I hit the power button. Nothing happened. I tried again. The oven kept heating, kept grinding. The tarts inside were starting to burn. Smoke began seeping from the edges. "Unplug it." Nora yanked the cord from the wall. The oven died with a wheeze and a click. But the damage was done. 3 trays of pastries ruined. The kitchen filled with smoke. Customers were coughing, fanning their faces. Someone opened the front door to let in fresh air. I stood there, spatula in hand, feeling my dream crumble like burnt pastry. "Is everything all right?" a voice asked. I turned. Vivian Crawford stood in the doorway, elegant in a navy dress and heels. Her expression was concern wrapped in satisfaction. Behind her, several townspeople had gathered, curious and concerned. "Just a small technical difficulty," I managed to say. Vivian stepped inside, surveying the smoky kitchen with sharp eyes. "Oh dear. Equipment failure on opening day. How unfortunate." She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "I do hope you have backup plans. Commercial kitchens are so much more complicated than home baking, aren't they?" Heat rushed to my face. Not from the oven this time. From humiliation. "We're handling it," Nora said firmly. Vivian smiled. "Of course. I'm sure Claudia is doing her best." She paused at the door. "Though I must say, proper preparation might have prevented this little disaster. Experience matters in business." She left, and her words hung in the air like smoke. Murmurs spread through the remaining customers. I saw doubt on their faces. Disappointment. One by one, they left. Some wished me luck. Others just left. By noon, the bakery was empty except for Nora and me. I sat at one of the small tables, staring at the cooling display case. Half empty, half my inventory ruined. The fairy lights suddenly looked childish instead of charming. "We can fix this," Nora said. But even her optimism sounded strained. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I would cry. James appeared in the doorway holding a toolbox. "Heard you had some trouble. Let me look at that oven." He worked on it for an hour while Nora and I salvaged what we could. James finally stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. His face was grim. "Someone tampered with the thermostat," he said quietly. "This wasn't an accident." My stomach turned to ice. What? The wiring was deliberately loosened. It's subtle, but it's there. This oven was sabotaged, Claudia. Nora's face went red. Vivian. It had to be Vivian. "We can't prove it," James said. "But yes, I'd bet money on it." I felt sick. Vivian hadn't just wanted me to fail. She'd actively worked to destroy me. The realization was a punch to the chest. That afternoon, a health inspector showed up. Unannounced. Unscheduled. He was a thin man with a clipboard and a perpetual frown. He inspected every corner, every surface, every piece of equipment. He found violations I didn't know existed. A crack in the tile grout. Improper ventilation documentation. My hand-washing sink was 2 inches too far from the prep area. "You'll need to correct these before you can operate," he said, handing me a citation. "I'll be back in 2 weeks for re-inspection." 2 weeks? My voice cracked. I just opened today. "Regulations are regulations, ma'am." After he left, I found a piece of paper tucked under the front door. No envelope. Just a note in typed letters. "Go back to your old life. You don't belong here." I held the note with trembling hands. Nora read it over my shoulder and cursed. "That's it. We're going to the police." "And tell them what?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. "Someone sent me a mean note? Someone might have sabotaged my oven, but we can't prove it? Nora, they'll think I'm paranoid." "You're not paranoid. You're under attack." But what could I do? Vivian was careful. Vivian was connected. Vivian had power and money and influence. I had a broken oven and a citation and a cruel note. I sent Nora home at 5 o'clock. I needed to be alone. I sat in the empty bakery as the sun set, surrounded by my half-realized dream. The fairy lights twinkled mockingly. The tables sat empty. The display case held 3 sad muffins and a lonely croissant. I thought about Peter. About the wooden spoon with our initials. About all the years we'd talked about opening a bakery someday. Someday had finally come, and I was failing. Maybe Vivian was right. Maybe I was too old for this. Too inexperienced. Too naive. Maybe I should just give up. James came back around 7. He didn't say anything at first. Just sat down across from me and set a paper bag on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Dinner. You need to eat." Inside were 2 sandwiches and 2 bottles of lemonade. We ate in silence for a while. The sandwich tasted like cardboard, but I forced it down. I failed once, James said quietly. Did I tell you that? You mentioned it. I lost everything. My restaurant, my savings, my reputation. I was 63 years old and starting over from nothing. James looked at me with those kind, weathered eyes. And you know what I learned? I shook my head. Failure isn't the end. Failure is just expensive education. He leaned forward. You didn't fail today, Claudia. You survived an attack. There's a difference. It feels like failure. I know. But tomorrow, you'll wake up. And you'll try again. That's what makes you different from people like Vivian. You don't give up when things get hard. His words stirred something in me. A tiny spark of defiance in the ashes of my terrible day. I don't know if I can, I whispered. You can. And you will. Because that's who you are. James stood up. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start fixing things. After he left, I sat alone in the darkening bakery. The note from the morning was still in my pocket. Go back to your old life. But what was my old life? An empty house. A silent kitchen. 3 years of grief and loneliness. This bakery, for all its problems, was something more. Something mine. Something forward. I locked up and walked home slowly. The night air was cool. Stars were appearing overhead. Somewhere in this town, Vivian was probably celebrating her victory. But I wasn't finished yet. Not yet. I woke up at 5 in the morning with a plan. Well, not a plan exactly. More like stubborn determination and 3 hours of sleep. But it was something. The health inspector's citation sat on my kitchen table. I made coffee and read through it carefully. Most of the violations were minor. Fixable. The ventilation documentation was just paperwork. The tile grout could be repaired. The hand-washing sink situation was trickier, but James might have ideas. I could do this, one step at a time. Nora knocked on my door at 7, holding her laptop and looking fierce. I have a plan. Me too, I said. Mine involves social media warfare. I almost smiled. Mine involves grout and paperwork. We got to work. While I called contractors about the sink and ordered supplies for the repairs, Nora photographed everything. The cozy interior, the hand-lettered signs, the few perfect pastries I'd managed to save from yesterday's disaster. We're telling your story, Nora said, typing rapidly. Small business owner faces setbacks but perseveres. People love an underdog. She posted on Instagram, Facebook, and something called TikTok that I didn't understand. Within an hour, people were commenting. Encouraging words. Angry words about sabotage. Promises to visit once we reopened. See? Nora showed me her phone. You have supporters. The comments made my throat tight. Strangers rooting for me. Neighbors expressing outrage on my behalf. It felt like armor against Vivian's cruelty. James arrived at 9 with a contractor friend named Bill. They examined the hand-washing sink situation and the ventilation system. Bill was a quiet man with capable hands and reasonable prices. I can have this done in 3 days, Bill said. The sink just needs to be moved 2 feet. The ventilation needs proper documentation. I'll handle that too. How much? I asked, bracing myself. He quoted a price that was high but not impossible. I had just enough in savings if I was careful. Very careful. Do it, I said. While Bill measured and made notes, I baked. Not in the bakery. The health inspector had shut down my operation until re-inspection. But at home, in my tiny apartment kitchen, I baked like my life depended on it. Chocolate chip cookies, lemon bars, blueberry muffins, banana bread. Everything I made went into boxes and bags. At noon, Nora and I loaded everything into her car and drove to the town square. We set up a folding table with a hand-painted sign, "Free samples from Whitmore's bakery reopening soon." People were skeptical at first. But curiosity is powerful. One person stopped, then another, then a small crowd. They tasted my cookies. They tried my lemon bars. I watched their expressions change from caution to surprise to delight. "These are incredible," a woman said, reaching for a second cookie. "When do you reopen?" asked a teenager with purple hair. 2 weeks, I said. We had some equipment issues, but we're fixing them. I heard Vivian Crawford was behind it, an older man muttered. That woman can't stand anyone else succeeding. Others nodded, murmured agreement. Apparently Vivian's controlling nature was common knowledge. I hadn't realized how many people quietly resented her. By 3 o'clock, all my samples were gone. But more importantly, I had a list of 30 people who wanted to be notified when we reopened. 30 guaranteed customers. It wasn't much, but it was something. That evening, I attended a town council meeting. I hadn't planned to, but Nora insisted. You need to be visible, she said. Show people you're not hiding. The meeting was in the community center. About 40 people sat in folding chairs, mostly discussing a proposed park renovation and new stop signs. I sat in the back, feeling out of place. Then Vivian stood up to speak. She was reporting on the Historical Society's upcoming fundraiser. She spoke smoothly, confidently, commanding the room's attention. This was her domain. These were her people. We expect significant community support, Vivian said. As always, I've secured donations from our most prominent families and businesses. Her eyes swept the room and landed on me. Though I suppose anyone can try their hand at community involvement these days. Success, of course, requires dedication and experience. The dig was subtle but unmistakable. A few people glanced my way. I felt heat creep up my neck. Before I could think better of it, I stood up. I have a question, I said. My voice shook slightly but held. What's the Historical Society's policy on supporting new small businesses? Businesses that contribute to the town's character and economy? Vivian's smile tightened. We support all legitimate enterprises, naturally. That's good to know, I said. Because Whitmore's bakery is reopening in 2 weeks, and I'd love to provide pastries for your fundraiser. Free of charge, as my contribution to the community. The room went silent. Vivian's expression flickered, surprise, then anger, then a forced smile. How generous, she said coldly. though I'm not sure we need. I think that's a wonderful idea, a voice interrupted. Edith Sinclair stood up, rhinestone glasses glinting. The Historical Society should absolutely support new local businesses. I make a motion to accept Claudia's generous offer. I second that, James said from across the room. I hadn't even seen him there. Vivian looked trapped. Refusing now would make her look petty in front of the entire town council. Her jaw tightened. Of course, she said through her smile. We'd be delighted. Assuming your bakery passes inspection, naturally, it will, I said, and sat down. My hands were shaking. My heart pounded. But I'd done it. I'd stood up to Vivian publicly. I'd claimed my space in this community. After the meeting, several people approached me. They shook my hand, welcomed me, promised to visit the bakery. Edith gave me a fierce hug. About time someone stood up to that woman, Edith whispered. James walked me to my car. That took courage, he said. That took stupidity, I corrected. Now I have to provide pastries for 100 people in 2 weeks. You can do it, and I'll help. James leaned against my car, his expression thoughtful. Vivian's going to fight back harder now. You put her in an awkward spot. She won't forget that. I know. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted and slightly terrified. What did I just do? You drew a line. You told her you're not going away. James smiled. That's exactly what you needed to do. The next morning, I found another note under my door. This one was different. Handwritten, on nice stationery. Mrs. Whitmore, I heard about your troubles and wanted to offer my support. If you need supplies or equipment, please let me know. A friend. There was a phone number at the bottom. I stared at it for a long time. Another anonymous supporter. Another person quietly rooting for me against Vivian's influence. Over the next few days, I worked like I hadn't worked in years. Bill finished the repairs ahead of schedule. James taught me advanced techniques for tempering chocolate and laminating dough. Nora posted daily updates on social media, building anticipation for the reopening. I baked every evening at home, perfecting recipes, building inventory. My small kitchen smelled perpetually of butter and sugar and vanilla. And slowly, something shifted. The terrible opening day started to feel like a bad memory instead of a death sentence. The health inspector's citation became a checklist instead of a condemnation. I was fighting back, not with money or power or influence. With pastries and persistence and the quiet support of people who believed in me. 1 week before the scheduled re-inspection, I stood in my nearly ready bakery and felt something I hadn't felt since Peter died. Pride. Real, earned, hard-won pride. The oven was fixed. The violations were corrected. The display case gleamed. Everything was ready. Bring on the inspection, I said to the empty room. I'm ready. Outside, the sun was setting over Cherry Lane. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Vivian was still out there, still scheming. But tonight, I allowed myself to hope. Hope tasted sweet. The health inspector returned on a Wednesday morning. His name was Mr. Garrison, and he brought the same clipboard and the same frown. I stood beside him, trying not to hold my breath as he examined every repair, every correction, every detail. He checked the hand-washing sink, measured its distance from the prep area, nodded. He inspected the ventilation documentation, flipped through Bill's paperwork, nodded again. He examined the tile grout, the storage areas, the temperature logs. His pen moved across his clipboard. I couldn't read his expression. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, Mr. Garrison looked up. "Everything appears to be in order," he said. "You're approved to reopen." I could have kissed him. Instead, I shook his hand too enthusiastically and thanked him 3 times. He left, looking slightly alarmed by my gratitude. Nora screamed when I called her. "We're back in business." The reopening was scheduled for Saturday. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to get everything perfect. I barely slept. I baked, I cleaned, I arranged and rearranged the display case. James helped me calibrate the oven, the repaired, unsabotaged oven. Nora created beautiful social media posts announcing our return. Friday afternoon, my supplier called. The one who provided my flour, sugar, butter, and eggs. Everything essential. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry," he said. He sounded genuinely apologetic. "But I can't deliver your order tomorrow." My stomach dropped. What? Why not? I received a call from another client. A very important client. She's hosting a large event and needs all available inventory. He paused. "I'm told if I can't fulfill her order, she'll take her considerable business elsewhere permanently." "Who's the client?" I asked, though I already knew. "I'm not at liberty to say. But I can deliver to you on Monday instead. Will that work?" Monday was too late. I needed supplies for Saturday's reopening. Without them, I had nothing to sell. "No," I said quietly. "That won't work." After I hung up, I sat at one of my small tables and stared at the empty display case. Vivian had struck again. This time, she'd cut off my supplies. Smart. Legal. Impossible to prove as sabotage. I called every supplier within 30 miles. The story was the same everywhere. Suddenly, no one had availability. Suddenly, everyone had unexpected shortages. Suddenly, they could maybe help me next week, but not tomorrow. Vivian's reach was longer than I'd imagined. Nora arrived at 6, took one look at my face, and said, "What happened?" I told her. She paced the length of the bakery, fury radiating from her small frame. "This is illegal. This has to be illegal." "It's not. She's just a preferred customer with deep pockets. Suppliers choose her over me. That's business." "That's bullying," Nora snapped. She pulled out her phone. "I'm posting about this. People need to know what she's doing." "Nora, wait." But she was already typing. Her fingers flew across the screen, anger translating into words. She posted about supplier interference, about powerful people crushing small businesses, about the need for community support. Within minutes, comments started appearing. Supportive comments. Angry comments. People tagging Vivian's name. People sharing the post. I watched the numbers climb and felt sick. Nora, this might make things worse. Good. Let it get worse. Let everyone see who Vivian Crawford really is. That evening, James appeared with an idea. Costco, he said simply. What? The big box store 20 miles away. They won't know or care about Vivian's influence. You can buy bulk supplies there. It might not be the same quality as your usual suppliers, but it'll get you through the weekend. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Why hadn't I thought of it? We drove to Costco together in his truck. We filled 2 shopping carts with industrial-sized bags of flour and sugar, flats of eggs, pounds of butter. It wasn't my plan, but it would work. As we loaded the truck, James said, "She's scared of you." Vivian? Scared of me? I almost laughed. That's ridiculous. Is it? Think about it, Claudia. She's wealthy, connected, powerful. But you threaten her somehow. Why else would she work this hard to destroy you? I didn't have an answer. We drove back in comfortable silence, the truck bed full of supplies and possibility. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. I'd been at the bakery since 4 a.m., baking with my Costco ingredients. The pastries looked beautiful. They smelled divine. The doors opened at 8. People came. Not as many as I'd hoped, but enough. Neighbors, supporters from social media, curious tourists. They bought cinnamon rolls and coffee. They took photos. They smiled. Around 10 o'clock, Vivian walked in. She wasn't alone. 3 women accompanied her, all dressed expensively, all regarding my humble bakery with cool assessment. Vivian's friends from the garden club, I recognized them vaguely. Claudia, Vivian said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Congratulations on your reopening. I thought I'd bring some friends to try your offerings. The way she said offerings made it sound like an insult. Welcome, I said, keeping my voice steady. What can I get you? Vivian studied the display case with exaggerated care. She pointed to a chocolate croissant. I'll try that. And perhaps your cinnamon roll. Her friends ordered as well. I plated their pastries carefully, my hands steady despite my racing heart. They sat at the largest table and ate slowly, deliberately, speaking in low voices that somehow carried through the whole bakery. Interesting texture, one woman said loudly enough for everyone to hear. A bit dry, don't you think? Another replied. Vivian took a delicate bite of her cinnamon roll. The flavor is quite ordinary. Nothing special. Other customers glanced over. Doubt flickered across faces. I felt my confidence crumbling with each cruel word. Nora stepped forward, her young face fierce. Excuse me, but if you don't like it, you don't have to stay. Vivian turned to her with mock surprise. We're simply offering constructive criticism. I'm sure Claudia appreciates honest feedback. Don't you, dear? What could I say? If I defended myself, I'd look defensive. If I said nothing, her words would stand unchallenged. James saved me. He'd been sitting quietly in the corner, reading a newspaper. Now he stood and walked to Vivian's table. Vivian, he said pleasantly. I couldn't help but overhear your feedback. As someone who ran restaurants for 30 years, I can tell you with absolute certainty that these are among the finest pastries I've ever tasted. The croissant has perfect lamination. The cinnamon roll is beautifully balanced. If you find them ordinary, perhaps your palate has become jaded from too much mediocrity." The bakery went silent. Vivian's face flushed. "Are you suggesting I don't know quality when I taste it?" "I'm suggesting your judgment might be clouded by other motivations." James smiled. "We all know why you're really here." Vivian stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor. "Come on, ladies. The company here has become rather unpleasant." They left in a flurry of expensive perfume and barely concealed rage. The door chimed as it closed behind them. For a moment, no one moved. Then an older man at the counter started clapping. Others joined. Soon the whole bakery was applauding. "Don't listen to her," a woman called out. "These are the best cinnamon rolls in the state. Better than anything at the old Sunrise Bakery," someone else added. Their support warmed me. But I knew this wasn't over. Vivian had been publicly humiliated twice now, once at the town council meeting, once today. She wouldn't forgive that. That evening, I found a series of online reviews for my bakery. All 1 star. All posted within the same hour. All saying variations of the same thing: overpriced, mediocre quality, unprofessional atmosphere, not worth visiting. The reviews were anonymous, but the timing was obvious. Vivian had moved her attack online. "We can report them," Nora said, reading over my shoulder. "These are clearly fake." But reporting took time. And meanwhile, potential customers would see those 1-star ratings and choose to go elsewhere. I sat in my apartment that night, exhausted and discouraged. Every time I gained ground, Vivian pushed me back. She had more resources, more connections, more time to dedicate to destroying me. How long could I keep fighting? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Tomorrow. Festival Bake Off. Town Square. Be there." I stared at the message, confused. Then I remembered. The annual autumn festival was tomorrow. There was always a baking competition. I'd completely forgotten about it. Another text arrived. "Vivian is entering. She's been taking lessons. She wants to beat you publicly. Don't let her. A friend." The anonymous supporter again. Whoever they were, they had insider information about Vivian's plans. I texted back. "Who is this?" No response. I lay awake most of the night, thinking about the bake-off. I hadn't planned to enter. But now it felt like another battlefield. Another place where Vivian would try to humiliate me. The question was simple. Would I show up and fight? Or would I hide and let her win? By dawn, I had my answer. I was going to that festival. And I was going to bake like my life depended on it. Because maybe, in a way, it did. The town square was transformed for the autumn festival. Orange and yellow banners hung between the trees. Craft vendors lined the walkways. The smell of caramel apples and roasted nuts filled the air. Children ran past with painted faces, laughing and shrieking. The baking competition was set up under a large white tent. 6 stations with portable ovens, mixers, and all necessary ingredients. A judge's table at the front. Folding chairs for spectators. When I arrived with my supplies, my stomach was a knot of nerves. Vivian was already there, arranging her station with military precision. She wore a designer apron that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her ingredients were arranged by height and color. Everything looked professional and intimidating. She glanced up as I approached and smiled coldly. "Claudia, how brave of you to enter." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, with more confidence than I felt. There were 4 other competitors. A young pastry chef from the next town over. An elderly woman who'd won this competition 3 times. A nervous teenager. And a middle-aged man who owned a catering business. The head judge was Mrs. Pemberton, a retired home economics teacher who'd been judging this competition for 20 years. She explained the rules. We had 2 hours to create an original autumn-themed dessert. Judging would be based on taste, presentation, and creativity. "Begin," Mrs. Pemberton called. I'd decided on apple rose tarts with brown butter glaze and cinnamon cream. They were beautiful, technically challenging, and quintessentially autumn. I'd practiced the roses 3 times last night until my hands cramped. Around me, other bakers moved efficiently. Vivian was making what looked like a complicated layer cake. The young pastry chef was working on macaroons. The elderly woman was rolling out pie crust with practiced ease. I focused on my own work. Peeling apples, slicing them paper thin, arranging them into delicate roses. The familiar motions calmed me. This was what I knew. This was where I belonged. 30 minutes in, Vivian walked past my station. She paused, studying my work. "Roses," she said. "How quaint. Though they do look rather simple." I didn't respond. I placed another perfect rose into its tart shell. Vivian moved on, but her comment had its intended effect. Doubt crept in. Were my tarts too simple? Should I have done something more elaborate? I shook off the thought and kept working. An hour into the competition, a small crowd had gathered. Nora stood in front, recording everything on her phone. James sat in the front row, watching intently. Edith was there too, wearing a bright orange sweater that matched the festival decorations. I slid my tarts into the oven and started on the brown butter glaze. The butter bubbled and turned golden, filling the air with a nutty aroma. Perfect. Vivian's cake was taking shape nearby. 3 layers, decorated with intricate piping and what looked like gold leaf. It was undeniably impressive. Professional. The kind of thing you'd see in a fancy bakery window. My simple tarts suddenly felt inadequate. 15 minutes. Mrs. Pemberton called. I pulled my tarts from the oven. The roses had baked beautifully, their edges crisp and caramelized. I glazed each one carefully, added a dollop of cinnamon cream, and arranged them on my presentation plate. They looked good. Not professional, not fancy, but honest and homemade and inviting. Vivian's cake, by comparison, looked like a work of art. "Okay, it is time," Mrs. Pemberton announced. We all stepped back from our stations. The judges, Mrs. Pemberton and 2 other town officials, began their rounds. They tasted each entry, made notes, conferred in whispers. When they reached my station, I held my breath. Mrs. Pemberton bit into one of my tarts. Her eyes widened. She took another bite, then another. She and the other judges exchanged glances. "Claudia," Mrs. Pemberton said, "these are exceptional. The flavors are perfectly balanced. The execution is flawless. And most importantly, they taste like love." My throat tightened. "Thank you." They moved on to Vivian's station. Vivian stood proudly beside her elaborate cake. Mrs. Pemberton cut a slice. All 3 judges tasted. Their expressions were harder to read. They nodded. They made notes. But they didn't show the same enthusiasm they'd shown for my tarts. After tasting all entries, the judges huddled together. The crowd grew quiet. I saw Vivian watching me, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Pemberton stepped forward. This was a difficult decision. All entries showed remarkable skill. But one stood out for its perfect balance of technique, creativity, and heart. She paused for dramatic effect. "The winner is Claudia Whitmore." The crowd erupted in applause. Nora screamed. James was grinning. Even Edith was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I stood frozen, unable to process what I'd heard. I'd won. I'd beaten Vivian. Mrs. Pemberton handed me a blue ribbon and a certificate. "Your tarts reminded us why we love homemade baking. They were perfect." I thanked her, my voice shaking. When I turned around, Vivian was staring at me with such fury that I took a step back. "This is ridiculous," Vivian said loudly. My cake was clearly superior in technique and presentation. "But not in taste," Mrs. Pemberton said firmly. "And taste matters most." Vivian's face went red. She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, someone pushed through the crowd. A woman, maybe 30 years old, with Vivian's same sharp cheekbones and elegant posture. She was well dressed, but her expression was soft, uncertain. "Mother," she said. Vivian's face drained of color. "Cassandra, what are you doing here?" "I came to see you. To talk." The woman, Cassandra, glanced at me. "And to apologize to Mrs. Whitmore." The crowd was dead silent now. Everyone was watching this unexpected drama unfold. "Apologize for what?" Vivian asked, her voice tight. Cassandra took a deep breath. "For the things you've done to her. I know about the loan application. The supplier interference. The fake reviews. I know all of it, Mother." This was the twist I hadn't seen coming. Vivian's own daughter, exposing her in front of the entire town. Vivian grabbed Cassandra's arm. "We need to discuss this privately." "No." Cassandra pulled away. "I'm tired of the secrets. Tired of watching you hurt people because you're afraid." She turned to me. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm sorry. My mother has been working against you since the day she heard about your bakery. She's been threatened by you. And I'm done enabling her behavior." Vivian looked like she might shatter. "Cassandra, please." "I've been your anonymous supporter," Cassandra said to me. "The notes. The phone number. That was me. I couldn't stand by and watch anymore. The revelation hit me like a wave. Vivian's own daughter had been secretly helping me, fighting against her mother's cruelty. "Why?" I asked softly. Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. "Because I know what it's like to be crushed by her. I've been trying to open my own business for 5 years. Every time, she sabotages me. Every time, she tells me I'm not good enough, that I'll embarrass the family. I'm 32 years old and I'm still afraid of my own mother." She looked at Vivian with something between anger and sadness. "Watching you fight back gave me courage," Cassandra continued. "You didn't let her win. You kept trying. And I realized I could do the same." Vivian stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Around us, people whispered and stared. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked satisfied to see the town's queen finally knocked from her throne. James stood and walked to Cassandra. "That took real bravery. Thank you for speaking up." Nora was already posting about this on her phone. The story would spread through town within the hour. Vivian's reputation, the thing she'd protected so fiercely, was damaged, maybe irreparably. Vivian finally found her voice. It was small, broken. "You've humiliated me. In front of everyone." "You've been humiliating people for years," Cassandra said quietly. "Maybe it's time you understood how it feels." Vivian turned and walked away through the crowd. People stepped aside to let her pass. She left the festival alone, her elaborate cake sitting abandoned on her station. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Victory didn't feel as sweet as I'd imagined. It felt complicated and painful and tinged with sadness. Cassandra approached me. "I hope you can forgive the deception. I wanted to help, but I couldn't risk my mother finding out." "You gave me hope when I needed it most," I said. "Thank you." She smiled, her tears still in her eyes. "Your bakery is wonderful. I've been visiting secretly. The raspberry tarts are my favorite." We talked for a few more minutes. Cassandra told me about her own dream, a boutique clothing store. How Vivian had blocked her at every turn. How she'd finally decided to move forward anyway, with or without her mother's approval. As the crowd dispersed and the festival continued around us, I stood holding my blue ribbon and watching Cassandra walk away. She'd been my unexpected ally. The twist I never saw coming. And somewhere in this complicated mess, Vivian Crawford was dealing with a loss far greater than a baking competition. She'd lost her daughter's respect. And maybe, for someone like Vivian, that was the biggest defeat of all. 3 days after the festival, Cassandra came to my bakery. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, just after the breakfast rush. She sat at a corner table with a cup of coffee, looking uncertain and tired. "Can we talk?" she asked. I sat down across from her. "Of course." Cassandra wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she needed its warmth. "I owe you the full story. About my mother. About why she is the way she is." I waited. Outside, a light rain had started to fall, tapping gently against the windows. "My mother wasn't always like this," Cassandra began. "When she was young, she tried to open her own business. A small art gallery. She'd always loved art, had studied it in college. She found the perfect space, got a small loan, spent months preparing. I leaned forward, listening intently. The gallery failed within 6 months. Not because she wasn't talented or hardworking, but because the man who owned the building next door, a wealthy, influential businessman, decided he didn't want an art gallery lowering his property values. He spread rumors. He pressured her suppliers. He made her life impossible. Cassandra's voice grew thick. My mother lost everything. Her savings, her dream, her confidence. My chest tightened. The parallels were impossible to ignore. She was 52 when it happened. Recently widowed, my father had died the year before. She felt like she'd lost her chance at building something of her own. At being more than just someone's wife or someone's mother. Cassandra looked at me. That failure broke something in her. Instead of trying again, she decided to become the person who'd hurt her. She built power and influence so no one could ever make her feel small again. I thought about Vivian's face at the festival. The fury and the fear mixed together. But she became the very thing she hated, I said softly. Exactly. She started doing to others what had been done to her. Controlling everything and everyone. Making sure no one could threaten her position. Cassandra's eyes filled with tears. And she couldn't see that she was destroying her relationships in the process. She pushed my father's memory away because it reminded her of vulnerability. She pushed me away because I wanted my own life. She even pushed away her oldest friend, Edith Sinclair. Edith? They were friends? Cassandra nodded. Best friends for 30 years. But when Edith's son wanted to open a hardware store downtown, my mother opposed it. Said the town didn't need another hardware store. Edith was furious. They haven't spoken in 5 years. Suddenly Edith's support made sense. She wasn't just helping me. She was standing up to the friend who'd betrayed her. When I saw you trying to open your bakery, Cassandra continued, I saw my mother's younger self. Someone brave enough to try despite the odds. And I saw my mother becoming the villain in someone else's story. I couldn't let it happen again without doing something. Rain drummed harder against the windows. I felt the weight of Vivian's story settling over me. Where is she now? I asked. At home. Alone. She hasn't left the house since the festival. She's humiliated and angry and… Cassandra paused. I think she's finally facing what she's become. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Cassandra reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a younger Vivian, maybe in her early 50s, standing in front of a small gallery. She was smiling, hopeful, radiant with excitement. This was taken 2 weeks before she opened, Cassandra said. Look at her face. That's who she used to be. I studied the photograph. This Vivian looked so different from the cold, controlling woman I knew. This Vivian looked like me. I'm not excusing what she did to you, Cassandra said quickly. She was cruel and vindictive and wrong. But I thought you should know she wasn't always a villain. She was once someone who understood exactly what you're going through. After Cassandra left, I couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. About young Vivian and her art gallery. About dreams crushed and bitterness taking root. James came by that afternoon for his usual coffee and raspberry tart. I told him everything Cassandra had shared. "That explains a lot," James said thoughtfully. Hurt people hurt people. It's the oldest story there is. Do you think she can change?" James was quiet for a long moment. "I think people can change if they want to. The question is whether Vivian wants to, or if she's too invested in being the person she's become." That evening, I did something unexpected. I baked a lemon cake, simple, elegant, perfect. And I drove to Vivian's house. Her home was exactly what I'd imagined. A large Victorian on the hill, immaculately maintained, surrounded by perfect gardens. I almost turned back 3 times before finally parking in her driveway. I knocked on the door, holding my cake like a shield. Vivian answered after a long pause. She looked smaller somehow, without her armor of expensive clothes and perfect makeup. She wore a simple sweater and jeans. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was bare. "Claudia," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I brought you something." I held out the cake. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Her house was beautiful but cold. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly coordinated, perfectly lifeless. We sat in her formal living room on uncomfortable antique chairs. "Cassandra told me about your gallery," I said. Vivian's face tightened. She had no right. She had every right. And I'm glad she did. I leaned forward. "Vivian, I understand now. Not that what you did was okay. It wasn't. But I understand why." Vivian looked away, her jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought she'd ask me to leave. Then her shoulders sagged. "When I heard you were opening a bakery, I saw myself. 50-something years old, starting over, so full of hope. And I remembered how easily that hope can be destroyed," she whispered. "So you decided to destroy mine first?" I told myself I was protecting you from inevitable failure. That I was saving you from the pain I'd experienced. Vivian's laugh was bitter. But really, I just couldn't stand watching someone else succeed where I'd failed. I couldn't bear to see you have what I'd lost. Her honesty was raw and painful. This wasn't the polished, controlled Vivian Crawford. This was someone broken and barely holding together. "Who was he?" I asked. "The man who destroyed your gallery?" "Walter Kingsley. He died 7 years ago, wealthy and respected, while I became." She gestured vaguely at herself. "This. Someone I barely recognize." We sat in silence. The rain had stopped. Late afternoon sun came through the tall windows, making dust motes dance in the air. "I don't know how to fix what I've done," Vivian said finally. "To you, to Cassandra, to Edith. I've burned so many bridges." "You could start by apologizing," I said gently. "Really apologizing. Not because you have to, but because you mean it." Vivian looked at me with something like hope. "Would you accept an apology? After everything?" I thought about it. About the sabotage, the cruelty, the fear she'd caused me. But I also thought about the photograph of young Vivian, full of dreams. About how easily any of us could become bitter when life breaks us. "Yes," I said, "I would accept an apology." Vivian started to cry. Not delicate, polite tears. Real, messy, years of pain tears. I moved to sit beside her on the uncomfortable antique sofa and let her cry on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said between sobs. "I'm so sorry, Claudia. For all of it. For everything." "I know," I said. "I believe you." We talked for 2 hours. Vivian told me about her marriage, her gallery, the slow hardening of her heart. She told me about watching Cassandra grow up and pushing her away because vulnerability felt too dangerous. She told me about Edith, about their friendship, about the hardware store argument that had ended decades of closeness. In return, I told her about Peter. About the 3 years of grief and loneliness. About finding purpose again in baking. About how close I'd come to giving up. "But you didn't give up," Vivian said. "Even when I tried to destroy you. Because people helped me. James, Nora, Edith. Even Cassandra, secretly." I looked at her. "Vivian, we don't have to do everything alone. We're not meant to." As I was leaving, Vivian walked me to the door. She looked exhausted but somehow lighter. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I didn't deserve your kindness." "Maybe that's exactly why you needed it," I replied. I drove home through the darkening evening, feeling like something fundamental had shifted. The woman I'd thought was my enemy was just another person carrying old wounds and making bad choices because of them. The next day, Vivian sent flowers to my bakery. Not the apologetic flowers she'd sent before, those had been obligation. These were different. A simple arrangement of sunflowers with a handwritten card. "Thank you for seeing me. Vivian." Nora read the card and looked skeptical. "Do you really think she's changed?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think she wants to. And maybe that's enough to start." That weekend, something remarkable happened. I was arranging pastries in the display case when I heard the door chime. I looked up and froze. Vivian walked in, followed by Cassandra. They sat at a table together, actually together, not on opposite sides but next to each other. Mother and daughter, trying. "2 raspberry tarts, please," Vivian said to me. "And coffee. Cassandra tells me they're her favorite." I brought them their order and watched as they talked quietly. Cassandra showed Vivian something on her phone, probably plans for her boutique. Vivian listened, really listened, nodding and asking questions. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't instant healing. But it was a beginning. Later that afternoon, Edith Sinclair came in. She'd seen Vivian's car outside and looked uncertain. "Is she here?" Edith asked. "She left about an hour ago." "But Edith," I took a breath. "I think she'd like to talk to you. About everything. About the hardware store, about these past 5 years." Edith's face worked with emotion. "I don't know if I can forgive her." "You don't have to. But maybe you could listen?" Edith sat at a table with her coffee, thinking. Finally, she pulled out her phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then she started typing. I didn't ask what she wrote. But I hoped it was a door opening, even just a crack. That evening, James and I sat in the bakery after closing. He'd helped me clean up, a routine we'd fallen into over the past weeks. His presence was comfortable, steady, reassuring. "You did something remarkable," James said. "With Vivian. Not everyone would have shown that kind of grace." "I just remembered that hurt people," I said. "Like you told me. And that healing has to start somewhere." James smiled. He reached across the table and took my hand. His touch was warm and gentle and full of unspoken possibility. "Claudia Whitmore, you're quite something," he said softly. I felt my cheeks warm. "James Callahan, you're not so bad yourself." We sat like that for a while, hands linked, watching the sun set over Cherry Lane. Outside, the town moved through its evening rhythms. Inside, something new was beginning. Not just the bakery. Not just friendships repaired or communities healed. Something between James and me. Something that had been growing quietly beneath everything else. "Dinner sometime?" James asked. Not as business advisors or fellow survivors. But as two people who might like each other. I finished. "Exactly that. I'd like that very much." The second twist wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a revelation or a confrontation. It was simply this: Vivian wasn't the true villain of my story. Fear was. The fear that had turned her bitter, the fear that had almost stopped me from trying, the fear that keeps all of us from becoming who we're meant to be. And maybe, just maybe, we were all learning to be brave enough to face it. 3 months later, I stood in my bakery on a Saturday morning and marveled at how much had changed. The space was full. Every table occupied. A line at the counter. The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls and brewing coffee filled the air. Nora was behind the register, efficiently taking orders and chatting with customers. She'd become my part-time employee, and she was brilliant at it. Through the window, I could see James in his bookshop next door. He looked up, caught my eye, and waved. My heart did that little flutter it had been doing for the past few months. We'd been on 7 dates. Real dates, with dinner and movies and long conversations that stretched past midnight. Last week, he'd kissed me goodnight on my doorstep, and I'd felt like a teenager again. Peter would have liked James. I believed that with my whole heart. The door chimed and Cassandra walked in, looking excited. She'd opened her boutique 2 weeks ago, 3 doors down from my bakery. The space was beautiful, full of carefully curated clothing and accessories. Business was already thriving. "I have news," Cassandra said, barely able to contain her smile. "The Chamber of Commerce wants to feature Cherry Lane in their fall promotional campaign. They're calling it the Cherry Lane Renaissance. Your bakery, my boutique, James's bookshop, they want to showcase how small businesses are revitalizing this part of town." "That's wonderful." I poured her a coffee. "On the house, to celebrate." "There's more," Cassandra said. "My mother wants to help fund a small business grant program for people trying to start their own ventures. She's calling it the Second Chances Initiative." I felt tears prick my eyes. Vivian, using her wealth and influence for good instead of control. It was more than I'd dared to hope for. "How is she?" I asked. "Better. Really better." Cassandra's smile was genuine. "We have dinner together twice a week now. We talk about real things. She's seeing a therapist. And yesterday, she asked about my father for the first time in years. Actually wanted to hear my memories of him. Healing wasn't linear or easy. But it was happening. Edith Sinclair arrived for her usual mid-morning coffee and biscotti. She'd reconciled with Vivian last month, a tearful meeting mediated over coffee at my bakery. They weren't back to being best friends, not yet. But they were talking, slowly rebuilding what had been broken. Vivian and I are having lunch today, Edith announced, settling into her favorite chair by the window. She wants my opinion on the grant program. Can you imagine? Vivian Crawford asking for my opinion. Times are changing, I said with a smile. For the better, Edith agreed. Though I'm still watching her. One false move and I'll thwack her with my handbag. I laughed. Edith's forgiveness came with conditions, and that was fair. The lunch rush came and went. Around 2 o'clock, when things finally quieted down, I stepped outside for some air. The autumn afternoon was crisp and beautiful. Leaves were turning gold and red. Cherry Lane looked like something from a postcard. James emerged from his bookshop and walked over. Without a word, he pulled me into a gentle hug. I rested my head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and sure. "Happy?" he asked. "Very," I said, and I meant it. We were planning a trip together for the holidays. Nothing extravagant, just a few days in the mountains, in a cabin with a fireplace. Time away from work, from responsibilities, from everything except each other. The thought filled me with equal parts excitement and nervousness. Starting over at 58 wasn't just about opening a bakery. It was about opening my heart again too. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. "Of what?" "Of caring this much. Of losing someone again." James pulled back to look at me. "I'm scared too. But Claudia, I'd rather be scared and alive than safe and numb. Wouldn't you?" He was right. These past months had taught me that safety wasn't the same as happiness. Taking risks, being vulnerable, trying despite the possibility of failure, that was where life actually happened. "Yes," I said, "I would." That evening, I hosted a small dinner party at my house. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and fresh bread. But the guest list would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. James, Nora, Cassandra, Edith. And Vivian. Vivian arrived last, holding a bottle of wine and looking uncertain. She'd lost some of her polished armor over the past months. She dressed more simply now. Smiled more genuinely. Listened more carefully. "Thank you for inviting me," Vivian said, handing me the wine. "Thank you for coming," I replied. We gathered around my small dining table, and it was cozy and warm and full of laughter. Nora told stories about her latest social media campaigns. Cassandra shared her plans for expanding the boutique. Edith regaled us with town gossip that was entertaining rather than mean-spirited. Vivian was quieter than the others, but she was present. Really present. She asked Cassandra about her business with genuine interest. She complimented Nora's creativity. She even laughed at one of James's terrible jokes. At one point, Vivian caught my eye across the table and mouthed, thank you." I nodded. This gathering, this unlikely collection of people, wouldn't exist without forgiveness and second chances. We'd all given them and received them. After everyone left, James stayed to help with dishes. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, washing and drying, our shoulders occasionally touching. "This is nice," James said. "Domestic." "It is nice," I agreed. I didn't think I'd ever have this again. People in my home. Someone beside me in the kitchen. Purpose and community and love? James asked gently. I turned to face him. His eyes were kind and warm and full of hope. "Maybe," I said softly. "Is it too soon to call it that?" "I don't think there's a right timeline for these things." James set down his dish towel. "But for what it's worth, I'm falling in love with you, Claudia Whitmore. Have been for a while now." My heart expanded until it felt too big for my chest. "I'm falling in love with you too." We kissed in my small kitchen, surrounded by clean dishes and the lingering smell of bread. It was sweet and gentle and full of promise. Later, after James went home, I stood at my window looking out at the town. Lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were living their lives, struggling, hoping, trying, failing, succeeding, loving. Peter's wooden spoon hung on my wall now, in a place of honor. I touched the worn initials with one finger. "I'm okay," I whispered. "I'm really okay." And I was. More than okay. I was happy. Scared sometimes, uncertain often, but fundamentally, deeply happy. 3 years ago, I'd been drowning in grief, convinced my life was over. Now I had a thriving bakery, a community that supported me, friends who'd become family, and a man who made me believe in new beginnings. Tomorrow, I'd wake up at 5 and start baking. I'd make cinnamon rolls and raspberry tarts and lemon bars. I'd open my doors and welcome customers. I'd chat with neighbors and serve coffee and watch people's faces light up when they bit into something delicious. It was a simple life. A good life. Mine. And somewhere in this town, Vivian Crawford was probably sitting in her big house, maybe looking through old photographs of her gallery, maybe texting with Cassandra, maybe thinking about second chances and how sweetly they can taste. We'd both been given another opportunity. To try, to grow, to become better versions of ourselves. Neither of us was perfect. Neither of us would ever be. But we were trying. And in the end, maybe that was enough. I climbed into bed, exhausted and content. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. But tonight, I would sleep peacefully, knowing I'd built something worth having. A bakery, a community, a life. And maybe, just maybe, a love that could last. The wooden spoon's initials caught the moonlight from the window. CW plus PW. But there was room for more initials now. More love, more stories, more sweet beginnings. "Thank you, Peter," I whispered into the darkness. "For everything. For the years we had. For teaching me what love looks like. For making me brave enough to try again." And then I closed my eyes and dreamed of cinnamon and sugar and second chances that tasted like hope. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more heartwarming stories to enjoy.